So this is going to be a ranking video, and I'm going to be ranking these 10 books. So come and join me and find out which was my least favourite and which was my favourite. Welcome back to Bookish Brummy. My name's Mel and I like to review books. So today's video is going to be a retrospective, which means that I'm going to look back on all of the books that I read in April, and I'm going to say a little bit about how I approached the month, the stats of that month, and then I'm going to rank those books from my least favourite up until my favourite. So I had a really good time in April. I set the reading prompt as award-winning April, which meant that I could only read books that had won awards. So I thought that would be a sure way to get some really good reads in. And as it turns out, that was correct. I did not have any book that scored under a 4-star. Over the whole month, I read 10 books, and out of those 10, 4 of those books were 5-star, and the other 6 were in between a 4 and a 5. So I've had a really good month, and actually all of those books were really competitive with each other. So, you know, being able to rank them from least favourite to favourite was a little bit difficult, but also I can't really say that my least favourite one is a book that I didn't enjoy, considering that the lowest rated was a 4-star. So with all the awards, I just want to go through which awards I actually went for. So I read 3 books that had won the Booker Prize. I read 1 book that had won the International Booker Prize. I read 1 book which had won the Women's Prize for Fiction twice. I read 1 book that had won the Pulitzer Prize. I read 1 book that had won the Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger Award. I read 1 book that had won the Nebula Award, 2 books which had won the Hugo Award, and 1 book which had won the Bram Stoker Award. So there was a massive range across awards as well. I think I managed to do 8 different awards. So the Bram Stoker Award is for Best Horror in the last year. The Nebula and the Hugo Awards are for Best Sci-Fi. However, the Nebula Award is given out by a panel of judges who are authors, like professional authors. And the Hugo Award is voted for by sci-fi fans. So that's the difference between those two. The Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger Award awards the Gold Dagger for the best crime novel in the last year. They do have some other awards associated with them as well. I just didn't get time to read any of the books that are associated with the other awards that they do. The Women's Prize for Fiction is awarded to female authors. So that prize used to be called the Orange Prize for Fiction when it first came out, and then it got changed to the Bailey's Prize, I think, and now it's just known as the Women's Prize for Fiction. So that has been called some different things throughout the years. The Booker Prize is for literary fiction, and I think that that's awarded to a novel that's published in English, because then you have the International Booker Prize, which is for a novel that's translated into English. And then the Pulitzer Prize is for outstanding literary fiction, which I think again has to be published in English. So 2 of the authors that I read from as well were Nobel Prize winners. So as I understand it, to win a Nobel Prize for fiction is not just based on 1 book that you've written, but it will be on a body of work. So yeah, I read a book in this list by Toni Morrison, who has been awarded a Nobel Prize for literature, and I also read a book by Kazuo Ishiguro, who was also awarded the Nobel Prize for fiction. So already you can see that I've had a massive range of awards, which goes across a massive range of genres, and 2 very heavily awarded authors are included in this list as well. So I would say that April was an absolutely phenomenal month with reading, and I'm really glad that I did this reading prompt. And it's one that I definitely want to do again before the end of the year. So I'm sort of considering maybe doing this again in August and having award-winning August, because honestly, I've still got loads of award winners on my shelves that I haven't read yet that I could easily do a second take of this prompt again in August, and pretty much span the same range of awards and possibly add in a few extras as well. So yeah, the range of awards I covered is not, the only awards that there are. There's obviously lots and lots of different kind of, literary awards, but And they were just the ones that appealed to me on my shelf at the time that I wanted to read. So basically, as I said, we had nothing below a 4-star. We read 10 books overall. The total page count for April was 4,054 pages, which gave me an average of around about 135 pages a day. So that's about average for me. That hasn't really gone up or down from the last few months. The oldest book that I read is from 1972, which was an Isaac Asimov novel. And then the newest book that I read was from Georgy Gospodinov with his book that was released in 2022. With the books that I read, basically I have spanned every decade from the 1970s up until the current decade. So there's been at least one book in each decade as well. So I really had a good spread. So let's get into the ranking and see which one came in the last position, which was 10th place. And that was Connie Willis's To Say Nothing of the Dog. Now this scored a 4-star. This is not a bad read at all. I really enjoyed this book. This is sci-fi, and this is the one that won the Hugo Award in 1999. Connie Willis is a Canadian writer, and this book is a bit of a play on another book that was written called, I think it's 3 Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. Which I hadn't realised until I actually read this book, and it sort of mentions Jerome K. Jerome in here. And then when I sort of looked into that book a little bit afterwards, I kind of realised that this is a bit of a parody of it. Now I was drawn to this because it's set in Coventry, which is not far from me in the West Midlands, and our main character is a time traveller, and he has to travel back to a certain period in Coventry's history because he's trying to find a missing object. Now, as I said, this book was quite entertaining. I did really enjoy it. The only reason it didn't really score much higher is because I feel like the first 100 pages, and this is about a 400-page novel, the first 100 pages were a bit slow to get going, and yeah, it took me about 100 pages to then suddenly get into it. So I don't know what could really be improved in that 100 pages. It just didn't really get going, and I didn't really care about the characters that much, like all their personalities. And then something just clicked after about 100 pages, and then I really got into this. So yeah, this is not a bad book at all, even though it's in the last position at number 10. So the next novel coming in at number 9, which may be a bit of a shock for some of you, is Stephen King's Lisey's Story. So this one had won the Bram Stoker Award in 2006. There's a bit of magical realism in here. And again, this is quite a chunky one. This is just under 700 pages long. Now, I enjoyed the story in here, but Stephen King's narrative voice was a little bit different in this one compared to other books of his that I've read. And I found the fact that he kept trying to, phonetically do the local dialect, and then there was a certain language going on between the main character and her deceased husband, and she kept talking to him in this language that they had kind of invented together, which was also like a bit babyish and also written out phonetically, and it just, to me, made it quite a tiresome read. And I think I would have just preferred it if he had just written it in plain English, if I'm honest. So I didn't really appreciate that aspect of it. However, the story itself I found really interesting, and I would say that this is sort of a metaphor, I think, for mental health issues, sort of poor mental health issues, and it's also a story about grief, for sure. So I would recommend this for Stephen King fans if you're going through Stephen King's back catalogue, because this is not a bad book at all. I enjoyed it. As I said, I did find the narrative voice a little bit tiresome, but I do know other people who say that this is their favourite Stephen King book. I don't think this is obviously going to be my favourite Stephen King book. I've read quite a few that I would rate higher than this, but I do kind of notice with because I also read Doohickey, which is in the literary suspense like this one, and I felt the same way about Doohickey. Like, I thought it was an okay story, but I didn't think it was great, yet there's other people who absolutely love Doohickey. So I think if you like Doohickey, you probably would like this one as well, because it's classed under the same category as literary suspense. So yeah, this one got a 4-star as well. So coming in at number 8 is Margaret Atwood, the Testaments. So this is basically the Booker Prize winner from 2019. I say the Booker Prize winner, it's one of 2 Booker Prize winners from 2019, which did cause a little bit of controversy in that there were 2 winners. So the other winner we do have coming up later on, because I did read that one as well, just to be fair to the winners of the award that year. So this is the sequel to Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. So there's a big deal about this one going on at the moment, because obviously The Testaments has just been released, I think, into a film. Now, I've personally never watched The Handmaid's Tale, and I've never watched The Testament, so I've only read the books, but I would like to go and see this in the cinema, so I thought I would prioritise reading this one. But I did read The Handmaid's Tale at the end of last year, and I would say that I enjoyed the story in this one. I enjoyed the way that it was written. I felt that it was written in an easier to digest way than The Handmaid's Tale. So what I mean by that is that The Handmaid's Tale, I just found the language a little bit difficult to get on with, whereas this one sort of resembled more of Margaret Atwood's more recent work. Because obviously The Handmaid's Tale was written back in the 80s, whereas this obviously was written in 2019. And I found that her more recent works are, they just flow better, they're just a bit easier to read, and that's what I found about this one. I would say that it's difficult to read this one if you haven't read The Handmaid's Tale, because obviously the world building is done in that. And then in this one, we're basically looking at the world from the position of the aunts. So in The Handmaid's Tale, you're looking at the world from the position of the handmaid. So I think you kind of need to read both to get a full appreciation of it. But yeah, I did enjoy this book. I gave this one a 4.25. I didn't think that it was worth a 5-star because, as I say, you can't really read this in isolation on its own. So coming in at number 7 is going to be Toni Morrison's Beloved. Now, I gave this a 4.5 stars, and this was the Pulitzer Prize winner in 1987. And as I said, Toni Morrison has also won the Nobel Prize for Fiction. I thought this was an absolutely tragic story. And the way that it's written really, really well. This story has still stayed with me. I almost felt slightly traumatized. I think when I actually finished reading the book, I think it took me about 2 weeks to actually get over what I had just read in this book. Again, this also includes some aspect of magical realism, and we are set in the 1880s, and we're following this lady who was an escaped slave. So this is set in America in the 1880s, and she is recounting some of basically her life when she was a slave and then after she escaped being a slave, and it's all wrapped around the death of her daughter, which plays a really key role in this. And then there are other characters in the story as well who are also linked to her. So some of them were slaves with her in the original plantation that she was on, and then there's also her daughter and her mother-in-law as well in the story, and we learn all about their trauma as well. So this is about basically the trauma of slavery and the havoc that can wreak on an individual, how they see themselves, how they interact with the people around them, their own family members, how they develop relationships. And it's also about the grief and the loss of a child. And yeah, there's just so much trauma in this book, but it is a very enlightening read, and it's totally worth it. But what I would say when I read this book is I can't say I enjoyed it. It was too horrifying to enjoy, but it was a story that needed to be told. So this is why this didn't score higher than the 4.5 for me. I think objectively it is a fantastic novel, and it's been written really, really well. But yeah, I can't say that I looked forward to reading it, but I wanted to read it because I wanted to understand the story, understand a little bit more about slavery, and yeah. So I'd say that this is worth your time if you're trying to understand stories about people who went through slavery, because obviously this is not set on an actual real human being, but it's set in a fictional character based off of, experiences that people genuinely had. The next one coming in at number 6 is Isaac Asimov's The Gods Themselves. So as I said, this was the oldest book on the list, and this won the Nebula Award in 1972 when it was published, and it also won the Hugo Award in 1973. Now this also scored a 4.5, but it's a much more light-hearted read. However, it is very, very heavy on the science, but I didn't find it too hard to get through. Generally, on the whole, I could Google some of the concepts that were being spoken about that I didn't really understand, and for the rest I think that they were pretty much well explained in the novel. This has, normal Isaac Asimov sense of humour in it, and it was actually like quite a complicated story, I think, but it was split into 3 parts, which made it more digestible. So, the first part is from one set of the protagonists involved, then the second part is the other people, and then the third part is, some other people that are involved, but you would say that are sort of looking into what's going on in this book. It's really difficult for me to actually give you the general premise of what's going on in this book because, as I said, it's quite a multi-layered story. But I enjoyed it. I think if you're a sci-fi fan, you would enjoy this, and I think that if you're an Isaac Asimov fan, you would enjoy this. And if you're not really into science fiction, but you sort of want to dip your toe, this might be a good place to start because although there's a lot of science in it, as I said, a lot of it is explained in the novel. I don't read that much science fiction. Space opera, the idea of it kind of does scare me. But Isaac Asimov has a really nice writing style and a really good sense of humour, so this might be one to try. Okay, so the next book on the list, coming in at number 5, is We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker. So this was the Crime Writers Association Gold Dagger Award, and this won in 2021. So I really enjoyed Chris Whitaker's book, All the Colours of the Dark. I listened to that on audiobook last year, so I was really looking forward to reading some more of his work. And this one really didn't disappoint. It's a crime novel where it's basically like literary fiction in a crime novel. He has really, really nice prose and a really nice way of writing, and he always develops all of his characters, and they always have a really, good backstory, and they're always connected really, really, really well, and he doesn't disappoint with the ending. So in this one, essentially, we follow a man who, as a child, basically went on a hunt looking for a missing little girl, and she was found to be dead. And then as an adult, he's the sheriff of that town, and basically that town has not really got over the trauma of the murder of that little girl. But there are people that, our sheriff is connected to who basically were involved in the murder of that. So it's sort of like how he is coming to terms with it. And then the family that were involved with this little girl, they haven't been able to get over their trauma. So we're following them. But then a secondary crime happens to this family that the sheriff then has to get involved in, and it's all sort of tied all together in the end. So I just thought that this was a really, really good crime read. If you like thrillers, you like crime novels, this is a good one to go for. Okay, so then the next one coming in at 4th place is Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other. So this is the Other 2019 Booker Prize winner. Now, I would score this a 5-star. Now, I'm just going to apologise because I'm not sure that I actually said that I scored this 4.75. Sorry. So yeah, now we're getting into 5-star territory. Now we've got Bernardine Evaristo's Girl, Woman, Other. I had never actually planned to read this book. Initially, when I was going to do award-winning April, I was only going to read books that I actually already had on my shelves. That was one of the points of the prompt, really, was that I had a lot of award winners. So I wanted to, go through the ones that were on my shelves. And I already had the Testaments. And then I realised, obviously, that in 2019, in the year that won, that there were 2 winners. So I actually went out and bought this book for this challenge. But I'm really glad I did because this was absolutely outstanding. So this follows 12 different women who have basically settled in the UK. And we're following their stories as, 1st gen or 2nd generation immigrants. And, we basically it's interesting because it's generational. So you'll have like one chapter that's got 3 stories of 3 different women, and one of them might be the daughter, one of them might be the mother or the granddaughter, and then there will be a third woman who is somehow involved with the 2 of them. And it carries on like that in every chapter, where we basically talk about 3 women who are connected to each other. And then by the end of the book, you sort of begin to see how all of these women are in some way or another kind of connected to each other. So this is more of a character study on these women, and you know how they've come to be who they are based on their experiences as to, you know, why they came to England and what happened to them when they came to England, or what happened to their family when they came to England. And it was really, really nicely done and really well written, and I just really enjoyed this. Okay, so in 3rd place, I'm going to tell you now, 3rd place and 2nd place was really hard to decide, because I found both of the books here on a par with each other almost, but I had to rank them. So this is what I'm thinking today, but I might change my mind tomorrow, and I could say something different in a week's time. But in 3rd position, we have The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now this scored a 5-star as well, and this won the Booker Prize in 1989. And Kazuo Ishiguro is another Nobel Prize winner for fiction. So he has done some really outstanding work in his time. This is one of his really popular novels, but also Never Let Me Go as well is a really popular one of him, which I did read last year and thought was also brilliant. So this is basically set in the 50s. And we are following a butler called Stevens, who's looking back on his life as a butler, and he's looking back at how he served Lord Darlington, who was his previous employer. And he goes on a journey, and that's why he's got time to be thinking about all of these questions. And he's also thinking about his father and the kind of butler that his father was, and you know, what's the difference generationally between butlers then and butlers now. And while he's looking onto this past time with Lord Darlington, it's an interesting time because it's when World War II essentially broke out as well. So it's kind of like, what was his employer doing during that time, and who was he supporting? And then what is, you know, our butler's role in serving, you know, his employer during that time? And I thought that this was just really beautiful. I really enjoy Kazuo Ishiguro's prose. His writing is just absolutely phenomenal. I always find that the moment that I, you know, turn into the book on the 1st or 2nd page, and I'm absolutely sucked in. And I read this whole book within a day. I mean, it's just over 250 pages long. So it's long enough that I spent quite a bit of time reading this in the one day, but I just absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed it. I think, you know, we're looking at Stevens as a character, and he's by no means a perfect character, but it's a really nice character study of him. And it's very difficult to do this book justice just talking about it like this. I just think that you have to read it to find out for yourself, because if I say much more about it, then I'm going to start giving the story away. But I really did enjoy this, and I'm looking forward to my next Kazuo Ishiguro book. Okay, coming in at 2nd place, also a 5-star, is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun. So this won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2007, and then it won the Women's Prize for Fiction again in 2020, but not in the entries that were put into the year of 2020. It was that after the winner had been awarded for 2020, the prize panel decided to look at all of the winners over the last 25 years and then decide out of those winners who was the winner of the winners, and this one won the winners of the winners. So as you can imagine, I was very excited to read this book because I do like Women's Prize for Fiction books most of the time. And so I had to get my hands on this one, and I actually bought this one a couple of months ago, and I would say this is probably the reason why I did the award-winning April challenge, is because I really wanted to read this book. So this is set in the 1960s in Nigeria, and we're following 3 characters as they navigate their way through basically post-colonialism after the British leave Nigeria, and then the ensuing Nigerian Civil War. This is a really moving book. There's a lot of action going on in this book. I learned a lot politically, about what was happening in that part of the world at the time. When I was actually reviewing this book, I did say that, you know, I'm surprised that I didn't really know more about the events that unfolded at this time, like, you know, because I feel like we're not really educated in the curriculum on this stuff. So this was a really, really worthwhile read. I thought the story was written really, really well. Again, the prose is absolutely beautiful in this, you know, and you wanted to root for all of the characters in here again, but it was also, as I say, quite educational, made me go out and read some other stuff on Google. And I would also say that if you enjoyed the Poisonwood Bible, which I did, that kind of ends in 1960 after the revolution with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where they basically, the Congo became, you know, free. But then this book kind of, as I said, goes from 1960 onwards. So if you were interested in the Poisonwood Bible and sort of what was going on there, it's kind of good if you read that one and then read this one afterwards, because then you've got sort of a greater span of years around the political upheaval that was essentially going on in Africa at that time. So I'd read the Poisonwood Bible at the beginning of this year, so that was still on my mind, and I thought that was an absolutely outstanding book. So, you know, I did actually find that quite helpful before I got into this book, given that I didn't really know much about what had happened in Africa during the 60s, basically. So that could be a place for you to start. This book is just absolutely outstanding. As I say, I totally recommend this. Okay, and in first position is also a 5-star, the International Booker Prize winner for 2023, Georgy Gospodinov's Time Shelter. So I read this fairly early on in the month, and it just ticked all of the boxes for me. I really enjoy boxes which kind of utilize memory and look into memory. I'm really interested in that kind of thing, and that's exactly what this is doing. So basically our main character is looking into memory with regards to history. So essentially sets up a clinic for Alzheimer's patients and sets up all the rooms in there to represent a certain year. So it might be 1973, or it could be 1982, or it could even be like 1957. And they literally go out and they get all the newspapers from that year, so they can leave them in the room. They make sure that any cigarettes or tea or like beverages or alcohol or anything like that that are in the room were sold at that time and have the correct packaging on them. So, you know, it's really authentic. Like, they make sure all the decor is as exact as it can be. And then the idea is that an Alzheimer patient or somebody who has that kind of memory loss can come and sit in these rooms and, you know, they'll actually be happier because Alzheimer patients tend to regress back in their memory to when they were younger. You know, it's a safer space for these people to go if that's the year that they are in their head. And then the idea is that their family can come and spend time with them in these rooms, you know, and enjoy maybe the last 1 or 2 years of where this person has a coherent enough memory that they can have a conversation, even if that conversation is centered around something that was actually several decades ago, but before they lose that ability, you know. So that was the reason that they started off these clinics. But then obviously, you know, there's got to be something more in the plot line, and off of those clinics, you know, the government then gets involved, and, you know, other types of people get involved in the idea. And then there's, you know, what are the problems that you can have if you're trying to live in the past, if, you know, maybe you shouldn't be living in the past. So I think with an Alzheimer's patient, you know, this was used as a way to try and treat them, and, you know, to give their family more time with the person, while they might have some cognitive function to be able to have conversation. But if you have people who really have no problem with their memory and just want to hide in the past, obviously that can cause some problems. And I just thought that this book is not really that big. I mean, it's about 300 pages, but it really does cover quite a lot of ground, you know, with regards to these topics. And I just really enjoyed it. I'm trying not to buy any more books at the moment, but I know that Georgy Gospodinov does have a couple more published. So I will look forward to picking them up at some point in the future. So yeah, as I tried to tell you at the beginning of this video, there's a pile of 10 outstanding books here, and I would recommend all of them. I'm really happy that when I took on this challenge, you know, I didn't end up with any duds. I have read award winners before that, you know, I've either went for a did not finish or just simply didn't like and wouldn't have rated, you know, above a 1 or a 2 in the past. But every single award winner that I picked off my shelf for this challenge, you know, merited the awards that they'd had. So I really recommend, you know, you doing this with your own bookshelf at home. Is, you know, if you feel yourself getting into a bit of a reading slump, maybe hunt out the award winners that you've got on your shelves and just sit and read a couple of them back to back. Because for me, like, I just feel like I've had a great month, and I really want to repeat this again soon. So let me know down in the comments below if you read any of the books that I read for award-winning April, and if you feel as positive about them as I do, or if you didn't like them, you know, for what reason why you didn't like them. I've really enjoyed, as I said, award-winning April, so I've also really enjoyed making this video and being able to talk about these books and, you know, promote them, because I think that they're all worth a read. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please press the thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see my future content, please press the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon. Bye!